My honored friend, I'll ne'er forget that day in June when we first met. Oh, would I had the skill to paint my vision of that Quaker saint. Robed in pale blue and silver gray, no silly fashions did she essay. Her brow was smooth and fair, 'neath coils of soft brown hair. Her voice was like the lark so clear, so rich and pleasant to the ear. Apprentice hand, on man oft tried, now made in her the nation's pride. We met and loved, ne'er more to part, hand clasped in hand, heart bound to heart. We travelled west, years together, day and night in stormy weather, climbing the rugged suffrage hill, bravely facing every ill, while resting, speaking everywhere, quite often in the open air. From sleighs, ox carts, and mayhap coaches besieged with beetles, bugs, and roaches, all this for the emancipation of the brave women of our nation. Now we've had enough of travel, and in turn laid down the gavel. In triumph, having reached fourscore, we'll give our thought to art and lore. In the time-honored retreat, side by side we will take a seat. To younger hands resign the reins, with all the honors and the gains. United down life's hill we'll glide, whate'er the coming years betide, parted only when first in time eternal joys are thine and mine. From Elizabeth Cady Stanton to Susan B. Anthony on her 80th birthday, February 15th, 1900, 120 years ago today. Today is her 200th birthday. Happy 200th birthday, Susan. I'll show this here now. I gave tours of the Susan B. Anthony house for 2 years, and that is not the only connection that I have had to Susan over the course of my life. So this video is going to be about that, about her popping up here and there for me. And I'll start with the picture that I think I linked to my Facebook profile below, and it's public, but the profile pictures are always public. The current profile picture is from, it must be 1998, maybe. And I had done a poster. It was commemorating the 19th Amendment, I think. Some kind of competition when I was in 5th grade, and or maybe younger. It was a long time ago, and I don't remember. But I found a picture, the picture that is my profile picture currently, from the time I, at some point, drew a poster which included for a kid, detailed depiction of the Susan B. Anthony house. And my parents had taken me, we hadn't gone on the tour or anything, I'm not even sure if tours were going at the time, but they had taken me to the house, they'd gotten a picture, I'd seen it, and I drew the house in detail, and I may have drawn Susan, I don't know. And then I drew other houses which were just shapes with doors and windows, I'm pretty sure. And this poster, I think it also included the words, or some of the words from the 19th Amendment. But it won a competition. And so I went to an award ceremony. I don't know where. For some reason, I'm thinking it was Dryden Theater, but I really don't know. And a couple of other classmates of mine won as well, I guess. And you can see them in the picture. One of them I definitely know who she was, and continues to be. The other one, I think I know the name. And then behind us is Susan B. Anthony, of course. And it was my first time meeting her. And I don't remember in detail, but it looks like we got along well. And I'm pretty sure that's Barbara Blaisdell, my friend from the Susan B. Anthony house, who will come up later, who is the Susan B. Anthony impersonator in Rochester, and apparently was back then as well. She has a great origin story that I won't tell because, one, it's her story, and two, I don't want to mangle it. but that contest. The only prizes that I specifically remember were a very nice yellow Walkman cassette player, which had these headphones that were just, it was like earbuds on headphones. It wasn't the black um, uh, cotton swab or whatever that you put over the speakers. It was just the speakers went directly in, like earbuds. And then also there was a small packet of three uh, plastic enclosed, I guess mint condition, literally mint condition Susan B. Anthony dollars. And I still have them in my closet at my parents' house, but I don't have them here. But I always have a Susan B. Anthony dollar handy, whether the one I carry around in my wallet or this one here, which lives with the rest of my coin collection. This one from 1979, and then the back, also very nice. Um, the eagle has landed on the moon. That's the Earth in the background. I think um, this dollar coin replaced the Eisenhower dollar coin, and I think the eagle landing on the moon is used in that one as well. Let's see if I can get Susan to shine like the eagle there. It's hard with this light because it's the sun, and therefore I have no control over it. But yes, I always carry a Susan B. Anthony dollar coin in my wallet with me. I think I have since college, because I remember flipping it a lot. Maybe back then I carried it in my pocket. I don't know. It's kind of a talisman. But both that and the story illustrate my attachment to Susan B. Anthony that I can't entirely explain. So moving forward, probably just under 10 years. I don't know exactly because I don't know exactly when I won that award. When I was at the Susan B. Anthony House, by the way, I did search for that poster, um, because I didn't get it back. They kept it and they put it up, and they said they were putting it up in the house. I don't know how the house was decorated back then. I don't know if it was in the little educational space in the house next door, which is the visitor center, which was Susan's sister's house. I don't know exactly, but somebody did take me up into the attic of the house across the street from the Susan B. Anthony house, which is where their offices are and where their storage is. And we went up to the attic and we looked around for it and we did not find it. But I did make an effort while I was there to find the poster from fifth grade or fourth grade, whenever. It might have been 1996, which would have been the 90th anniversary of her death, but I don't know that we would necessarily have been celebrating or commemorating the anniversary of her death. Anyway, jumping forward to, well, getting there first, because getting there is an important part of the reason why the class that I took between freshman and sophomore years of college had such an effect on me. She wasn't, I mean, I guess I learned about her and women's suffrage and women getting the right to vote in history classes probably, let's see, from there, the next time I took U.S. history was 8th grade, and then the time after that I took U.S. history was 11th grade, and I guess she was mentioned, but I don't really remember too much about her from those specific classes. And there's a lot to cover, and I wasn't in the AP class or the honors class or anything like that, so we just, but I didn't know, and I definitely didn't know all of the other women who I later learned about. But jump ahead to between freshman and sophomore years of college, I am trying to knock off core requirements. And so I thought it was going to be African American history, but then, and I think I signed up for that class, but then it changed to American women's history, and I just wanted the American history requirement out of the way. And I didn't want to have to interrupt the classes that I was taking at Geneseo. I took this class at Nazareth, and the summer in between, um, so that I could concentrate on musical theater and English classes at Geneseo. Um, and there's a lot that I learned from American women's history that I had not learned in previous history classes. Um, and I'm not going to even start going into it because I would this video would be unbelievably long. Um, but we got to suffrage, we got to Susan B. Anthony, and we watched Not for Ourselves Alone by Ken Burns, the documentary by Ken Burns, um, which is, I think, the first time I ever learned about Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the other woman in this picture. Um, I'd explain specifically which is which, but I already showed a picture of Susan B. Anthony, so even if you weren't familiar with how she looked from the coin, you should be able to say which one is Susan B. Anthony. Um, and that that amazing, and how Frederick Douglass came into the picture. Um, I don't know that a documentary had or has since affected me so much and just awed me so much. Um, I I was our final paper for that summer class was um, women in media and depictions of women in media, and I naturally went within musicals and wrote about how strong women were portrayed in musicals on the stage, on the Broadway stage, at a time when they weren't really being portrayed on television or in movies in the same way, because you had people like Ethel Merman playing them. Ethel Merman doesn't play the weak character. Um, and as a toss off line, I wrote, with characters like Mama Rose and Dolly Levi in this golden age, these strong women. Where was the buddy musical for Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony? And at the time, I was maybe thinking, oh, this would have been something that Sondheim would have written with Julie Stein, or someone else, or maybe he would have written it on his own. It was around that time. And I was thinking Mary Martin would have played Susan B. Anthony and Ethel Merman would have played Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And as I have mentioned on YouTube and many places on my blog before, uh, I have this musical in the works. I have had it in the works since, that would have been 2006 if I said it was 2005 previously. 2005 was when I graduated high school and started college. So between freshman and sophomore year would have been 2006. And I'm only correcting that if I got it wrong earlier, which I forget if I did. But 2006 was when I first started outlining it, and I still haven't gotten finished. Um, and I feel bad about that because I had originally wanted to have it ready for Elizabeth Cady Stanton's 200th birthday 5 years ago. But we'll see if it ever gets done. I still need to find a composer to work with. A lot of people say that's a great idea for a musical, and I'm so glad you're writing a musical, telling the stories about these historical women who nobody tells the stories of. But it's not a project for me, which is both encouraging and disappointing, as most things are. So that was, and of course, as part of that class, us being in Rochester, I made my second in my life visit to the Susan B. Anthony House and took the tour. And I don't actually remember much about it because I went straight from the tour to my brother's high school graduation, and that kind of dominated my thoughts at the time. I actually had to take the tour alone instead of with the class because the class took a tour later that day, uh, while my brother was in the process of graduating, and I wanted to and had to be at the graduation. So that was my second ever visit to the house. And so for the rest of my college career, I kind of pursued this musical theater project, and uh, it dictated some of the classes that I took, and it became the capstone project. A version, an early, not even necessarily complete version, became my capstone project for the Women's Studies minor, because the head of the musical theater program was also the head of the Women's Studies program, and I almost completely accidentally uh, fell into the women's studies minor. It was only a minor. I guess there is a major now, but it was a minor then. It was only a few classes, and I just kept taking, without specific design, I kept taking women's studies courses, and I ended up with a women's studies minor. And this book was actually for, I think this was for two classes, and only one of them was a class specifically about 19th century uh, reformer, women reformers. And but I think it was originally I purchased it for Humanities 2, which was taught by the same person. Um, and speeches, Solitude of Self-Speech, and various letters were assigned. Um, and we probably didn't pay too much attention to the poem that I started with. But I have since been through it a couple of times and underlined and bracketed things uh, so as to better adapt these two women's interactions into a musical. And I have a ways to go. So that's where I got this book and how Susan figured into my college career. And then after I graduated college, um, I started doing musicals with local professional Rochester theater groups. Um, but the job market was not great, and I wanted to do something that I knew would get me out of the house regularly and that I knew that I would enjoy. And so I enlisted to give tours at the Susan B. Anthony House. And it happened to be the 150th anniversary of the building of the house, not of the Anthonys living in the house, but of the house being built. It was built in 1859 by a dentist. And randomly connecting all of these things, I want to write a musical about Susan B. Anthony, whose house was built in 1859 by a dentist, which is the same profession that my great uncle Harold had before he started writing musicals for Ethel Merman, who would have made a great Susan B. Anthony or Elizabeth Cady Stanton in a musical. So there you have that. And this probably played a significant role in my later love for collecting small, shiny pins that represent historical places. So that. And I loved giving tours of the house. My tours, now they have tours at specific times, but at the time, when I was doing it from 2009 to 2011, it was just whenever somebody showed up. And if somebody showed up after a tour started, depending on where the tour was, they either waited, or there was another docent there, or they joined the tour late, and then I caught them up later on. My tours ranged from 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on questions, depending on if it was raining, and I took them out to see the Let's Have Tea statue by Pepsi Ketavong of Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass having tea. And yeah, the crocodile skin purse, I can't control the light; it's the sun. They had one of her dresses. I believe they still do. A pew from the original Unitarian church building, which the original building burnt down, but one of the pews was saved, and it is at the Susan B. Anthony House in the attic office space. A huge desk from when Susan had her newspaper, The Liberator. And another antique piece that was also connected to the news. Oh no, the newspaper was The Revolution. The Liberator was William Garrison's or Garrett Smith's, somebody else's. It wasn't Frederick Douglass's, because Frederick Douglass's was the North Star and then the Frederick Douglass Monthly. The Revolution was Susan and Elizabeth's paper. I call her Susan, and I did on all the tours. A lot of the docents called her Miss Anthony. Maybe even some called her Ms. Anthony. I always called her Susan because, one, I'm more familiar with her than most people just by virtue of being the one who shows people around her house on a regular basis, and knows where everything is in her house. And also, if she were around, or I had been around back then, we'd be friends. Um, we'd definitely be good friends. So, um, so many great things. A sewing machine that she gave as a present to one of her friends as a wedding present. A couch, and I never quite got what made it a horsehair couch, um, but it was a horsehair couch that had belonged to Susan. And then learning about the process of how these things were collected and the verification process, um, finding the right and restoring the house, finding the right wallpaper for the dining room from photographs. Um, the wallpaper in the dining room changed during my time there. And I don't know what's currently happening in the very back of the house. There's a room at the very back, just off the. It was probably the kitchen. Um, it was definitely the kitchen, but it was never part of the tour really until toward the end. They put up pictures in there, and I would take people in to look at the pictures, but it wasn't really a restored part of the house. Um, Little knickknacks that belonged to her, a bust that was made as part of the. If you've ever been to the statuary in the Capitol in Washington D.C., there's a sculpture that's not officially known as Three Women in a Bathtub, but that's how I always refer to it. I think that's how it's colloquially known. It's her, Elizabeth Stanton, and Lucretia Mott, kind of emerging from a block of marble. I'm not sure why that's how it turned out, but the bust of Anthony that's in the house was made in preparation for making the bigger sculpture of all three women. Um, yeah, it was her glasses, a pair of her glasses. I don't know where they are now. They were briefly in one of the rooms, but that room was closed for renovation for most of the time that I was giving tours, and now I think it's a set up as a guest room, and they have, um, at least last time I saw it, it was set up as a guest room, and they had descriptions of various people like Charlotte Perkins Gilman who had stayed in the house. Um, but her glasses, those little glasses, they're probably in the visitor center now, if I had to guess. So a lot of great times. And one of the coolest things that happened, and also simultaneously did not happen while I was there, was they wanted to, I guess for a fundraiser, they wanted to put on this play that some guy had written about the trial of Susan B. Anthony. If you know anything about Susan B. Anthony, you know that she was arrested for voting. And you can also visit the site of the place where she voted, which was a barbershop at the time. Now there's the building's gone, and there's a cafe nearby, the 1872 Cafe, 1872 being when she voted. And there's a sculpture, possibly also by Pepsi Ketavong, I think it is also by Pepsi Ketavong, of a ballot box on the site where she voted, illegally at the time. And the play was about how she was arrested and tried. The contents of this book, which I think it's a trial transcript with, like I said, the introduction by Lynn Scher, who I have tried to contact and meet several times, but I have been unsuccessful. I think she wanted to write a play about Susan too. I don't know if she ever did. She's still alive though, I think, and so maybe we can work together. I don't know. But this guy, Gary Paul Lehman, had, it was two plays. It was two short plays, and they gave them to me as the theater person, and they knew that I was writing a musical, but maybe they also sensed that it wasn't quite ready. So they asked me, and he gave permission for this. They gave me the two plays and asked me to fact check and sew them together into a single thing. And in preparation for making this video, I went back through my emails and I found my version. I haven't reread it, but I got it all printed out nicely. It's about 30 pages, and Susan is a character. Marshall E.J. Keeney, who arrested her, is a character. And I think I created a character, or maybe reworked a character to be just a young woman, uh, Jane, um, to interact with Keeney, because Keeney was a young guy. He was a little bit intimidated having to arrest Susan B. Anthony, and just to have the conversation from the perspective of young people at this time who the law is still the old law, but they're the ones who are going to have to deal with the laws of the future. And the way things go now has more effect on them than on the old people, the same way we talk about politics now and why young people should vote. Um, Matilda Jocelyn Gage is a character here. Judge Henry Selden, the guy who said, who sentenced her to a fine of $100 for voting. She said, "I'll never pay a penny," and a penny has never been paid, as I and I think several other of the docents put it on the tour. So I'm looking forward to rereading this. Not necessarily my first real effort at playwriting, and it wasn't my play. I was just working with stuff that was already there. I think I made significant contributions, and I was told that the guy that Gary um, appreciated what I had done, that he liked what I had done. So that was gratifying. They never actually put it on. I had suggested friends of mine for the cast, and I, if because I was moving at the time, and I think if I'd stayed, I probably would have, like, spearheaded it because I was really excited about it. But I moved to New York just at the wrong time for this to get out. But maybe it will have a future life. Maybe I'll get in touch with this Gary Lehman after I read the play, find out more about him, and whatever happened with the play, his version and or mine. This is another of the things that I bought on my way out. What's this? These are notes, I guess. I read this as part of working on this. So I did my research. I was diligent. The Susan B. Anthony voting scene of my musical is one of my favorites. And I don't know if anyone will ever see it, but I like it. And I think she's quite fun in it. Problem with the musical is that it doesn't know who to focus on. That's one of the problems. Also, it was written by someone just out of college. Where am I? I'm almost at a half hour, and I don't want this to be too long because I want people to actually watch it and learn a few things about Susan B. Anthony and go visit the house. I'm getting a little... The greatest happiness I have is in receiving my friends in my own home, Susan B. Anthony. Now, the home was never actually hers because it belonged first to her mother, then her sister. It never actually belonged to Susan, but it's her house. Showed those things. And I don't want to say too much more about the tour because you should take the tour for yourself. I don't know if I still know many of the people who are there. I didn't recognize anybody when I visited a couple of years ago. But there you have it. That's and to this day, I have a friend, a new friend at the theater company that I go to the meetings of. She reminds me a little of Susan B. Anthony. I haven't told her, but I occasionally see her in a reading, and I think I got to get a Susan B. Anthony play going so that I can see her play Susan B. Anthony. And I have this thought about actresses that I work with every so often. A couple of years ago, I was working on a play. One of the actresses really reminded me of Susan B. Anthony. And again, I didn't actually know her in person, and I'm not saying that they remind me of Barbara, who impersonates Susan B. Anthony, but just the essence that I would get talking about her in the house, how when she was arrested, she insisted on being handcuffed, and when they got on, I think it was a trolley, and she was asked for fare to ride the trolley, but she was under arrest, so she said, "I'm traveling at the expense of the United States government. He will pay my fee," referring to Marshall Keeney. She was a very, very interesting, amusing woman, and well worth a depiction, the equivalent of Denzel Washington as Malcolm X or Daniel Day-Lewis as Abraham Lincoln. That kind of performance I want to see. Um, I don't have anyone in particular in mind for it. I just want her to be given that kind of piece, that kind of storytelling. Stanton too, but this is about Susan. And frankly, no offense to Stanton, but Susan is the more iconic, the more of a character of history, more so than Elizabeth, who was more of a background. And it's why they worked well together. Stanton didn't like giving speeches, but she was a great writer. Susan was not very confident as a writer, but she had all the energy in the world and all the freedom in the world, not having Stanton's 7, 8, I don't know, I don't remember how many kids. Susan could go around traveling. So Elizabeth would write the speeches, Susan would go and give them, um, and which is perhaps why she became more of the face of the movement, why she got the coin, um, and and while there are other reasons that perhaps in a video about Elizabeth Cady Stanton I can go into why Stanton was lost to history in many ways. Um, and I'll leave you with this story about, let's see, it would have been Susan's 191st birthday. So 2011, February 15th. Uh, I'm I have a shift at the house. Barbara, the Anthony impersonator, has a shift at the house, and it's Susan B. Anthony's birthday, and it's not as busy as it should be, probably because it was really snowy. Um, so Barbara tells me that or she says that she's got plans to go to the Mount Hope Cemetery to visit Susan's grave and wish her a happy birthday in person. And I say, oh, I'd love to go with you and do this. And so after our shifts are over, we get in our cars. I follow her because I'm not as confident getting to the Mount Hope Cemetery. And I'm in my little PT Cruiser, and she's got a Jeep. I think it was a Jeep. I don't know cars. Cars and shoes, as I was telling my friend yesterday. I don't know cars and I don't know shoes. But again, it's snowy and it's icy. And the hill that leads up to Susan's grave at Mount Hope Cemetery has not been de-iced. So we go up and then we both kind of stall. The cars won't move. And foolishly, I put my car into park, I get out, and I say, we can't move. I guess we should walk up. And she says, yeah, so we plan to park the cars and walk up. So I go back to my car, the door's still open, and just as I'm about to get in, the car starts moving backwards without any nudge from me. And it's icy, so even though I'm pushing on it as though I could move a car, my feet are slipping back, and so my car is pushing me backwards, and I don't want to lift my feet and to try to get in because I have some semblance of control when I can touch the ground. But soon, it gets so slippery and so fast that I slip under the door of the car, but I'm still holding the handle of the car door. So now my car is dragging me down the icy hill. And this is a PT Cruiser that looks like a Woody wagon. The story is in one of the blog posts linked to below. And what's going through my mind is simply, it'll stop. When it gets to the bottom, it'll stop. And it did. And fortunately, nothing worse than what I've described happened to me. Got to the road at the bottom of the hill, and the car stopped. And I got in, drove it to the parking lot, parked. And then I came back, and her Jeep was, she had backed into a snowbank. So then I start trying to dig her out and rocking the car a little bit to get her out. A couple of people walk by, they see that we're struggling. Well, I don't know if I asked or they offered, but they helped. And, I put sticks under the tires to try to give them some traction. Eventually she escaped and parked, and we walked up and we sang Happy Birthday to Susan B. Anthony together. And the most I've been able to do for her this year is, you'll see the Atlas Obscura link below to the entry that I wrote about the house. And initially I only had pictures that I had taken about the outside of the house and of Susan B. Anthony Square and the Let's Have Tea sculpture. And it was a cloudy day. They're not very attractive pictures. So I contacted the house. I got permission to use their official press pictures. I contacted Atlas Obscura. Atlas Obscura put the press pictures in. So now there are some bright, shiny new pictures of the inside of the house, the dress, um, the various rooms. Check that out and go to the house and take a tour. It's wonderful. I'd say tell them Aaron sent you, but that probably won't mean much to the people who are there currently. Um, so I am going to wrap it up with that. Happy 200th birthday, Susan B. Anthony. And in lieu of my traditional sign off, I will go with something that we're not sure Susan actually said precisely, but a quote which is attributed to her. It's on the sweater. Failure is impossible.